Hello, fellow caring people. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for caring. I want to make sure that you saw the warning. This video may not be suitable for minors. Wow, okay, so first thing I want to tell you is I am sharing my story because I follow my intuition. And my intuition is telling me that I must share this story. I can only guess that some people will be helped by it. If you're watching and you feel like your life or your suffering was nothing compared to what I'm about to tell you, that's okay, that's fine. But I also invite you to think about how this information might apply to you or might validate your experience, or maybe you have someone that you could share this with that needs this information. I also want to publicly acknowledge that part of the mental illness that my family has been suffering from, the biological family that I'm no longer in touch with, part of the function of that mental illness is that when someone is in the role that I have played, speaks out, tends to be mobbing or a smear campaign. So I would just like to publicly announce this is my story. I am not smearing anyone else. No names are mentioned. And in fact, nobody is Googleable in my family. By the time this is out there, everyone would be blocked, unfriended. And so if you are someone who you feel like has been referenced in this video and you're upset, please take your own advice and deal with it on your own. And anyone who I'm not in touch with now associated with this story is welcome to come to me. I will be welcoming them back with open arms once you have a certification in nonviolent communication. You understand how to listen. You're very curious to listen. And you have been to a therapist and you have the equivalent in a letter from a therapist. And either me or someone that's representing me, my choice, not yours, will speak to your therapist before we actually speak. Those are the rules, no exceptions, boundaries. We are going over today how I didn't kill my mother, yet she killed her cat. You'll understand why me not killing my mother is bone-chillingly relevant, even to me. Recently, I was talking to someone on my care team. So I have a therapist and a psychiatrist and a acupuncturist and an energy healer and an assistant and very good friends and about 5 coaches. And I'm very transparent with everyone that I choose to advise me. And a couple of months ago, let's say, someone on my caregiving team actually heard what I was telling them and said, wow, this sounds like Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I had never heard of this. It turns out that if you know about this, you know about it from movies because there are movies made about it. So I'm going to give you the definition of Munchausen by proxy, and then we're going to be talking about, I'm just going to be sharing my story about how I escaped from this. Well, how I came to the realization of this, how I was strong enough to escape. Yeah, and kitties are involved too. They are, sadly. How I came to the path of nonviolence and peace instead of murder. I'm serious. So we're gonna come back to Munchausen, but before we even begin the story, I'll read to you what Munchausen by proxy syndrome is. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a mental illness. It's also a form of child abuse. It affects caregivers, especially caregivers of children. Someone suffering from MSP will act as though the person under her care is sick. They often will falsify medical information. And this gains sympathy for the caregiver. Okay, so I'm just reading from the internet, but what this is saying is that a caregiver needs attention. And in order to get attention, they actually make up an illness about the person they're caregiving for, or they actually cause that person that they're caregiving for to get sick. So, yeah, that is officially in my life what I found out had been going on in my life for 41 years, being poisoned even as recently as 5 months ago. So, physically poisoned, yes. So, let's begin at the beginning, shall we? Let's say when I was 19 years old, I came home from college. I went away to college, and I came home from college, and all of a sudden I had this realization kind of like out of nowhere, this like epiphany. Some might call it a download these days. And I was like, oh my gosh, my parents emotionally ignored me. And the result is that I look like Punky Brewster Rainbow Bright. I mean, people would call me Rainbow Bright. I was 19 years old, and for those of you who don't know, in 1999, rainbow hair was very rare. That should be like a bumper sticker. So it was not something that a 4-year-old would wear to preschool. It was not something that a grandmother would put on her head. It was rare, it was weird, it was a freaky thing. There were safety pins everywhere, and I was pretty loud and obnoxious, I will admit. And I sort of just put these two and two together. Oh my gosh, I need attention. This fluorescent yellow hair is a grab for attention. I'm loud. And I had the chutzpah to immediately confront my mother. We were at my grandmother's house for Christmas. That's how quickly it was. I got some space from my mom, and I realized it was the first time I went away to school. And I confronted her, and I said, oh my gosh, you ignored me, and you emotionally ignored me as a kid. And her quick response was taking responsibility for it, which I, many years, thought was very valiant and very awesome of her and my dad. She says, why, yes, we did. But that's because we spent so much time focusing on your physical health. And I think we did a pretty good job of keeping you alive, because it was pretty hard. And she goes, she like demanded, weirdly, this is a weird thing, she like demanded that I go tell my father the same thing right now, which was, I just thought was really weird. But I did, and she was like, didn't we do that? And he was like, yeah, we did that. So I was like, okay, well, that's cool. They kept me alive. So for those of you who don't know, I suffered a great deal from asthma and allergies. The food could kill me, and the air could kill me. And I was trained from a very young age, not only to not eat certain things or breathe in certain things, but if I did, that I would die. I was also trained from age 4 that I needed to take pills every night to stay alive. These pills actually were extraordinarily toxic. Anyways, so, alright, so I'm a sensitive kid. I have asthma and allergies. That's kind of normal. This is the 80s, 90s, freaking nature. I eat a peanut, anaphylactic shock, I die, right? Okay, maybe I should have been a kid in a bubble. Well, as time goes on and I really start to come into my own, I graduate college with a BA in psychology, and I become a social worker. And then I start to eventually, after 10 years of becoming a social worker, I start to rediscover my spirituality, which was very strong in childhood. I started leading spiritual retreats when I was 14 years old for 17-year-olds, just like hoping they wouldn't find out how old I was. And of course, that was lost in teenage land and young adult land, and then right? It came back. I was kind of like searching again. So as time goes on, I start to realize, oh, right. So what I really needed was emotional attention. And when I didn't get it, this is what I thought, I would get sick. And so the less emotional attention I got, the more sick I got, right? Because that was where I would get attention. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. And also it was real because I was realizing at the same time that everyone in my family, well, not everyone, my parents, self-admittedly, were terrified at every moment that I was going to die. So this is what my mom says, this is what my dad says. And so, but at the same time, they literally presented to everyone, children, everyone, that everything was fine and everything was safe. So in some ways we all do this, but this is an extreme version. Okay, I want you to know this, that as you're watching this, if you feel like, people do this to every extent, like everyone has a little bit of narcissism in them or whatever. Yes, that's true, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this times 11. So then I realized as I spiritually developed, as my psychic gifts developed, because at this point, September 12th, 2021, I have been full-time self-employed as a spiritual leader, professional empath, and intuitive. And I teach people how to trust their intuition. And so as I develop spiritually, I start to see that, well, what I thought was true before is that if they had paid attention to me emotionally, that I wouldn't get physically sick. That was true. But what was also true is that everyone was lying, as in, we're terrified, but we're telling you that we're fine. And as an extraordinarily sensitive being, I've been paid to be sensitive for over 15 years, or 13 years as a business owner, feeling your energy with no logical evidence. Something fell off. It's if you know someone's lying, you'll feel anxious if you know that. If you're relying on this person and you have no choice but to rely on this person, you can't choose more parents when you're little. You can't. You can't choose another family consciously as a little kid. You can be, oh, I'm going to choose people who aren't poisoning me. You can't do that. So if you have to rely on these people and they're lying to you, you're going to feel anxious. So anyways, I was like, all right, well, that was true. And the family was feeling stress and not dealing with it, which was most of the time. I would have an asthma attack. My tether to being alive. You can go for how long without food? We're going to find out later for cats, unfortunately. You can go for 3 days without water? How long can you go without breath? I don't know. Google it, but not very long. So I would be smothered. And I was the problem because it was hard to keep me alive. So everyone was stressed. Yet I was the one that was dying because they were... It's this cycle. As a 31-year-old, I wound up getting into a relationship with... I will shy away from calling this person a narcissist. Call it what you will. They scored 8 out of 10. 10 ways you can tell your partner's a narcissist. 8 ways. So, 80% is this person a narcissist. You decide. The ex. This ex, I'll call him. You know, him for quite a while. And when that relationship ended, my family's response, they were all sitting around the fire. My mom put me on speaker, which was not appropriate. Talk about crossing boundaries. It's in the middle of a divorce. I just left. They're around the fire camping. I'm in crisis, leaving an abusive marriage. And my mom's response is, well, I think we're going to get rid of you and adopt him. Now, in retrospect, with not having the information that I have now, it was in alignment with when you are in partnership with an abuser, the outside world thinks him or her is Mr. and Mrs. Charming. That's par for the course. If you didn't know that, now you do. Don't feel bad if you didn't know it. It's just pretty common knowledge now. You know, narcissistic abusers, charming people, molesters are like super getting people, right? And then they're doing something behind closed doors. So when the outside world was like, no, we love him, it felt horrible to hear that, but like it fits. Like, I was married to someone who really fooled everyone, but really treated me horribly behind closed doors. So I visit home, and my mom, so remember, Psychology, relationships, spirituality have been my jam since the beginning. I study them, I live them, and I teach them. So when I get divorced from someone who got an 80% on the narcissism scale, I set forth in finding how me and my childhood best friend and my cousin and now my other childhood best friend I find out now, and these other people who, how in the world could these strong young women be fooled by these narcissists? I was set out to help solve that problem because that's part of what I do for a living, to be honest. This afflicts so many empaths, unempowered empaths and narcissists. Raise your hand, yes. If it's not you, it's someone you know. So I'm already like doing the healing, investigating, all these things, more than anyone else you would ever know in this situation, to be honest. And I visit home and my mom starts screaming at me in the kitchen. How could you get into this? I don't even remember what she was saying, but I'd never, as an adult, remembered anyone except my ex talking to me that way, treating me that way, screaming at me that way, abusing me in that way, calling me names in that way. And I stood up. And the only way to get through to someone like that is I got bigger. I shouted louder. Think about it when you're like confronting an angry bear. What are you supposed to do? You got to get bigger. Or at least present yourself as bigger. So I did that. And I said, because, I didn't say it in this energy, but I said, because I never stopped him from treating me the way that you're doing right now, you will never treat me like this again. Now that didn't come 100% true, but we'll get to that. So, what wound up happening was I moved back in the pandemic and to my parents' house to save money, to be in a pod that included someone more than just my cat, to be honest. I had no one in my pod. I was afraid living in California I would never be able to see my family again. That was a fear for a lot of people during some really dark times in the pandemic. It's not something completely strange. And still, some people, a lot of people, if your family member is in the ICU right now, I bet you were concerned that you might not be able to see them again, regardless of how long the pandemic has passed from now. That's just the truth. So I was in that position, and when it was interesting, I was living in LA, and all of my closest friends zipped home. And so I was left alone. And so what did I do eventually? I zipped home after an invite from my dad. And I was amazing. When I got to back to New York, upstate New York, I came across a teacher, a program with coaches that both me and my team felt so good about. It was, we had a specific problem in our business, and this program not only promised to solve it, but we did the work, and it proved to be true. So I sign up because I am a business owner. I sign up for this program. My team is 100 backing enthused. We really work our butts off, and we make some amazing milestones. And honestly, we accomplished something that I bet you and everyone you know wishes that they had. We accomplished recurring profit every month so that all of my bills were paid for. So guess what? I could take off work to take care of my aging parents, who are almost 80. Mom's health completely declining, and it's all sorts of mess. And Dad doesn't know how to use GPS or doesn't know how to open an app, and sometimes doesn't know where he is when he's driving. So I am like, wow, so excited. All my bills are paid for. I am taking off work, that I'm able to help, and the whole family is aware, everyone, that the plan is to have someone come in hired, which they can afford, to do what I was doing because I have a job. I have a community that's already built. 300 people right now online taking my class that I am actively supporting. Thousands of people before that taking this class. So everyone knows, that's the plan. And so on month 6.5, 7, things really start to click in for me. After a while, I start to really realize that I'm being treated horrifically. And it's really kind of becoming more and more apparent. And mind you, I'm in therapy. And I'm actually in therapy twice a week. Because life is so intense. And I had been in therapy for a couple of months. And my therapist has just been hearing all these stories about childhood, right? Like, oh yeah, I got sick for every single holiday for 6 years. Every Easter, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving. What do you mean you got sick? Oh yeah, someone fed me something I was allergic to. And I would be doubled over in pain and have to douse myself with Benadryl and just be sick and be like passed out. She heard that for a long time. Oh yeah, my mom says I was a really hard to deal with teenager because she would cook me meals that I was allergic to and I would eat them. And I would get really upset because I was hungry and then I was sick. And someone fed me something that was poison. She heard all these stories for quite a long time. And a lot of the like current events, right? Because I was living with them. And then, and I think it was around this time too that someone very close to the family said, oh, I think your mom's jealous of you. You got to get out of there. So I looked up jealous mom, and that led me to narcissistic mom and covert narcissistic mom. And I was like, oh, I didn't want to know that. I did not want that to be true. More than 8 out of 10. More. Much more. So see, my therapist, oh yeah, I think she's a narcissist, covert narcissist. She checks off all the boxes. Oh, and by the way, I told you how they refused to feed their cat, right? Wait, what? Yeah, I thought I told you that. You didn't tell me that. What do you mean? I'm talking to my therapist. Well, there had been so much SHIT going on that I thought I told her because, as I said, this is really intense. This is one of the reasons why I don't want kids watching. So I don't remember exactly when it started. It was many months before. But, sorry, it's just really intense. Maybe you want to take a breath with me. So, I have a cat, and I got her from someone else. Shout out to you, Doug, because you are awesome. Her former owner wrote me a text the other day that was just completely sweet and so nice, so compassionate. Doug, you're amazing. So I have a cat, and she was overweight when I got her, and so she's lost weight, and she's losing weight still. And it's not good for a cat to be overweight. And my parents had a cat as well. And so I want to tell you what I'm about to tell you, which was what I was telling my therapist, is that this is verifiable from outside sources. One of them being my best friend in the capital region, who I overheard tell her partner the story, and her story matched my story completely. So, just wanted to let you know. So let's see. I move in, and the story is that their cat is really old. And when I move in, she's skin and bones. She really is. You can count her ribs. And she's gonna lose balance a little bit, and she's scruffy. And my bestie in the Capital District has a soft spot for elderly cats in particular, which is super nice. I follow Wolfgang, whatever his name is, on Instagram. I'll put the handle down there. And he always has senior dogs. So when one senior dog dies, he gets another one. He always has nine or 8 little senior dogs and 1 bigger one. I follow him, and it's just super sweet and super compassionate, super inspiring. So it's really special when people are very big animal lovers. I'm an extraordinarily big animal lover, and I've dedicated my life to creating nature preserves, which you'll see at the very end of this video if you decide to stay. So, their cat. So the story is she's just really old, and she's dying. It's just like kind of feeling. It's just kind of natural what happens when you're dying of old age, right? Things start to break down. You start to lose your balance. You can't hear. You can't see. But the interesting thing is when I ask how old she is, like no one really gives me an answer, but they give her around like 14 or 15. And for those of you who don't know, maybe if you don't know at all, or if you're familiar with dogs naturally live to that long. Cats can live 18, 19, 20, 21. So a 13-year-old cat is not an old cat. So anyways, I didn't think about it that much. But what happens is, moving from California back home, for some reason I still had some wet food that I was not feeding my cat, once again because she was on a diet. And randomly, after a few months, my mother decides to feed one of these cans of wet food to her cat. And the cat, no exaggeration, ate this wet food so quickly that she snorted it up her nose. Like, she didn't stop, and she ate it so quickly. I was like, whoa, she really likes that. So I was like, oh, there's more there. So I fed her another one later that day. Same thing. And she's a very small, elderly cat. She's not elderly. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to keep feeding her this food. So what happened was, I shared with my parents. Oh, by the way, your cat, she needs to eat this food. She loves this food. She's hungry. And what happened to even prove what I was kind of already onto was they were away for a week, and I fed her, I think it was twice a day, I fed her the wet food. And I thought she might even be mute. I thought something had happened to her voice, because I didn't hear her talk at all that week. At all. She didn't even mew. What I didn't tell you yet, dear fellow caring human being, is that this cat had notoriously for years woken the whole neighborhood up. I literally would get Facebook messages. I think there's something wrong with your cat. I've never heard a cat yell so loud 2 blocks away all the way home. And my parents, for years, have complained to everyone under the sun that at 4:30 in the morning she comes in and howls and howls and howls and howls and howls. And indeed, she was extraordinarily loud. And I'm sorry, this is just hitting me now. Before I started feeding her, we all would comment that some of her cries sounded like a baby dying. I'm not exaggerating. Just hold on. It was so alarming. You can cut that pause out because I invite you to take a deep breath too. So over the course of the next couple of months, I had some talks with my parents, and the last one was me pleading and crying with them, telling them the need to feed their cat, to which they refused every time, arguing against it adamantly. My last screams in those arguments were, I didn't put 2 and 2 together until just now. When a baby cries, it needs something. If you've changed a diaper and you've hugged it and you've burped it, it doesn't have a fever. If you haven't fed it in a while, probably it's hungry and it doesn't know how to say it either way. It just cries, and if you haven't done it in a while, it probably cries because it hurts. It's really hungry. So It was around this time. I don't remember when it was, maybe October-ish, when it started to land. I was alone upstairs, and the feeling. I hope you never actually have to experience this feeling. I didn't even watch these movies. But the feeling, it was the feeling that I've only seen, where that creepy sound of, who are these people? They're killing their cat. What are they capable of? What does this mean for me? And at this point, I'd already experienced so much, let's put it succinctly and accurately, lack of empathy from my family members. That I just knew, what do you do with this information? And weeks would go by, and I would be feeding the cat, because I'm not going to let the cat starve, and I would see if they would feed the cat. And for instance, one day, as I mentioned, the cat at 4:30 in the morning is starving. It's 10 a.m. and the cat has not been fed, and my mother is sitting in the kitchen where the cat food is, where the cat gets fed, and the cat is howling and circling and screaming. Why? Because it's starving to death. And I say, are you going to feed the cat? No. Are you sure you're not going to feed the cat? No. Why? I don't feel like it. So I told this to my therapist. And that's when she said, this sounds like Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I said, what? Never heard of that. She said, look it up. So we did. Now, I just want to be very clear. This therapist is very clear that she cannot make a diagnosis, and she never did. She just said it sounds like it. Legal disclaimer. When we hear about the cat, that won't matter. When we hear about what happened. So, we've gone over what Munchausen is already, but let's go over some common illnesses or symptoms that people in my position might have. Failure to thrive, breathing difficulty and asthma, allergic reactions. Now, we didn't exactly go over traits of narcissistic mothers, and I might just kind of post those real quick and show you what I saw. No, we didn't verbally go over them. So I've been used to, by this point in my awareness about the after effects of having a narcissistic and jealous and covert narcissistic mother. And I dated so many narcissists and broken up with so many narcissists that I kind of knew what happens. But it was at this time when Munchausen syndrome by proxy came into my awareness that I was prompted by my intuition to start watching information about cults, specifically Scientology. I think it could have been any cult, but there was a plethora of information on Netflix, or I don't remember what it was. The real long series. I really didn't know I was watching it. I don't watch a ton of TV. I watch some, but not that much. And it was really strange. But when I watched it, it gave me the anatomy of cults and how they work and what happens when you leave them. Well, guess who cult leaders are? Narcissists. And so I knew what I was up against by trying to leave the situation. Mind you, if any family member or a friend of the family member knows about this in my life, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, it's because of this video. Before September 12th, 2021, if they knew about it, it's because they knew about it without me knowing and never told me. In other words, I never let anyone know about this. But what happened was I asked everyone to be kind. It turns out, I didn't even know this until earlier today when I was doing some research about narcissism for this video, is if you have a narcissistic parent, there's a whole mapping of the family members. And there's a scapegoat. You know who that was. And it turns out that there's just roles, and the whole family winds up mobbing the scapegoat. I literally read in an article, you wind up being the punching bag for everyone. And I was writing to my family, I will refuse to be the punching bag for everybody. So, narcissists, their accusations and insults are projections, confessions. And I know this by research and experience. And what I found out by my mother's words, quite literally, towards the end, confirmed everything that I already knew and put together. So right before I found out this Munchausen syndrome by proxy, my mom was regaling stories and literally mentioned failure to thrive. A story that was a broken record that I've known for 41 years. So the story goes, from her mouth, thanks, Mom. I was a baby. And for those of you who don't have kids or babies or don't know, when you're born and you get home, usually you lose weight and then you gain weight. It's normal. And then some people don't gain weight and they shrivel and shrink and start to perish. And that is known as failure to thrive. Instead of progressing, you regress. And so back in 1980, and even today, people believe the cause of failure to thrive is lack of interaction and neglect. And so one of the functions of this Munchausen syndrome by proxy is the caregiver, in this case mother, really knows how to work the medical system. And so my mom's story, as it goes, that I heard as recently as 3 months ago, is when you were little and you weren't gaining weight, they diagnosed you with failure to thrive. And the doctor said that to me. And I turned around, and every time she gets so riled up, I turned around on that doctor and I said, how dare you? How dare you accuse me? She's not failure to thrive. You find some other cause. No way they would leave that on me. And in the same week, the broken record story of how difficult I was of a teenager, because every week I would be fed poison and I would be upset about it. And it was so hard to deal with me as an upset teenager. I was wild. I was insane. I was so upset and crazy. And guess what? The whole family believes that. Just 2 days ago, I was like, oh, this is interesting. My mom, and this is Munchausen by proxy, she was a champion at school, making sure no one abused me and that I was taken care of, and they never fed me anything I was allergic to. In all of my school days, kindergarten through college, I was never fed anything I was allergic to. Never. Yet at home, 6 years in a row, Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, in my stocking, food that they knew I was allergic to, in my Easter basket. You're a 10-year-old and someone feeds you poison that you love, you're gonna eat it. Even when I was living with them, there was this poisonous dish detergent that made me sick. It gave me a rash, stomach ache, made me ill. Confronted them several times. They swore up and down they wouldn't use it. Snuck it in, made me sick. Throwing the rash in their face. They don't get it. It's a mental illness, so I do have compassion. There's so much I could say. I won't get into the drama of it, but with the cat, I went back 2 months after to grab some clothes. I'm driving back and I think to myself, what's the first thing I'm gonna do when I get back there? I'm gonna feed that cat. So, now we have the answer. How long can a cat go without food? To be fair, everyone in the family will agree, including me. Yes, there was always a bowl of the cheapest dry food there, full. Her whole life. Was it poison? I don't know. She didn't eat it. But she could have, and then she wouldn't have died. Because when I went back, there was no food bowl. There was no water bowl. There was no cat. Someone who's hugely inspirational to me is Signo Tarot. And one of her like truths and bits is about the holiday song, Do They Know It's Christmas? And she's saying, and she's right. She's just like, I don't understand. It's a catchy tune. I love it, but the lyric, they're talking about people not having enough to eat and starving in Africa, which I literally just in this moment realized we're talking about starving children. And I was a starving child and they starved their cat. I didn't realize that until this moment. Welcome to my life. And Tig says, like, the lyric in the song is, so tonight, thank God it's them instead of you. And Tig's like, why in the world would you ever be thankful that someone else is starving and not you? That doesn't make any sense. Well, Tig, because you're definitely watching. Hey, Tig, hey. And Cheryl. Tonight, I thank God it was their cat instead of me. And I wish I didn't see that. But I don't need an official diagnosis. I got one. So, we gotta wrap up with the whole murder thing. Don't you want to know about that? How is it that I didn't murder my mom? Well, we didn't talk about me being murderous, and luckily I've never thought that. I really never had thoughts about killing people. My ex-boyfriends and whatever, I've had violent thoughts or whatever, but never killing. But all this makes sense with the narcissism and the Munchausen, because when I was a kid, I got my palm read. It's like a teen. And this is when I was being poisoned every week and being called a crazy person and being poisoned with a bunch of medication too. I got my palm read, and I even though I've been a professional psychic medium for 14 years, 13 years, whatever it was, I don't do palms or cards or anything. This is way before I discovered my gifts. And the reader was like a 60-something-year-old guy, been doing this for decades. He's like, I've only seen a handful of these. And it was as creepy as it sounds. And I was like, what? And he's like, look at your thumbs. So here's my thumb. It looks like a regular thumb. Here's my other one. I'm sorry, little thumb. You kind of look like a toe. If we want to be mean about it. But we love toes. Well, this one's shorter. Okay. So the palm reader says to me, this is from unresolved childhood issues, suppressed anger. And the people who had this are famous for sort of like that frog in the pot, like not realizing, and then all of a sudden, boom, exploding, taking a knife in the kitchen, turning it on their lover. Well, Tig and Cheryl, not only were you inspiring and helpful to me when you reviewed the documentary Mommy Dead and Dearest, which I would never watch, just hearing how angry you got over the abuse made me feel validated. So thank you. Yes, but so when I came home from the palm reader, my mom said, how did it go? And I was like, wow. Look, I got a murderer's thumb. They said it's from suppressed childhood emotions. Her response, quite literally, was, you can move out of the house now if you want. And she was serious. It's just like I was telling you what the palm reader read. And then later on, I was in therapy, and she says, hell, how was therapy? I was like, oh, the therapist said my problem was that, you know, mentally I'm old enough to move out, make my own decisions, but like I still gotta wait another 6 months before I go away to college. And that's like a relatively normal thing. Well, the next day she comes into my room and says, my therapist said you should have your independence. So your father and I said, here's all your college money, take it and move out now. You wanna move out? Move out. And I was like, whoa, I was just trying to tell you what my therapist said. So please trust that I'm doing really well. I'm still processing, and I think that's going to be quite a while, remembering, like, oh, I thought it was a cute memory that on pizza night I had to watch everyone eat pizza, and if they felt like it, they would save their crust for me, and that was my meal. Oh, I thought that was a cute story. My therapist is like, no, that sounds absolutely horrific. Every single person in the family is in this cult, in this brainwashing, and I don't blame them. We have the golden child, we have the scapegoat. And everything I read and learned just confirms what I already knew. You know, my siblings and other family members and friends of the family, they have the ability to reconcile these things with me because they piled on and mobbed too and continue to. But that requires an admittance. That requires to feel that guilt. That requires for you to feel the pain of the abuse that you inflicted. I already forgive you. I already love you. I've told you this. And once you learn nonviolent communication, the art of listening, and you have that certification, I will welcome you back into my arms and we can have a healthy relationship again. In the meantime, for all the rest of you, I want to ask you, do you trust yourself? Because if you don't, you're probably feeling anxious. And in fact, it's everything that I teach. I had to walk my talk to gain clarity throughout this whole situation and get out of it. So if you are not trusting yourself, or if you trust someone above you, your doctor, your boss, your partner, your mom, the only way to lose that anxiety is to start to trust yourself more. And if you think you do trust yourself, let me leave you with this. Patience is easy for those who trust. I'm speaking from experience. Let me ask again. Is it easy to be patient? If yes, then you do trust yourself. Congratulations. Call me up. Let's be friends. If not, there's a link below. How to trust yourself without a doubt. No second guessing, no matter outside situations. I walk through fire for a reason. This is how we change the world. You want narcissists to go away? Trust yourself. It's the only way. Thank you for your support. Truly, it means a lot. So many people have offered free services and discounted services to me in my time of need because I was thrown out with less than 24 hours notice and no money to feed myself or house myself. True story. The money ran out. That's when I got kicked out. And honestly, that's where I sit today. But I trust I'll be okay. And I really made this video to help other people. And one of the biggest tactics that Scientology, cults, narcissists have is smearing and silencing. Well, my voice is my instrument, and guess what? My voice is my livelihood. That's why I am sending this out now, before these people are dead, when they could retaliate, when they could smear. If I kept silent, I would die. So instead, I'm trusting myself, trusting my intuition, and being authentically me. And that's what I wish for you. So until next time, may you be authentically you, and may your intuition be with you. Thank you so much for your love and support. It really means the world, and honestly, you're what keeps me going when it's really dark. And you've seen, it's gotten really dark. Thank you.
The LaFay Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to creating nature preserves. When it comes to the environment, most people are very worried and feel helpless when it comes to turning around the effects of global warming. That's why we're taking the majority of the profits of Trust Yourself and giving them to the LaFay Foundation to create nature preserves. Once a nature preserve is created by the LaFay Foundation, it will forever be dedicated to nature, clean water, and homes for the flora and fauna that we love so much, and keep us in a balanced environment. When you take the steps to trust yourself and join us in the Trust Yourself community, you also preserve nature. Heal yourself, preserve nature.